Everyone in the palace knew one thing about Princess Charlotte. She didn't cry. Not when she scraped her knee on the gravel path near the East Garden. Not when her hamster, Biscuit, died on a Tuesday morning and they buried him beneath the rosemary bush before breakfast. Not even the day her father's face appeared on every television screen, in every room looking hollowed out in a way she didn't have words for yet. Charlotte didn't cry. So when Thomas Hendricks, Royal Protection Officer, 14 years in service, a man who had once stood expressionless through a state banquet where a foreign dignitary knocked an entire tureen of soup onto the Queen's shoes, when he turned a corner and saw Charlotte sitting on the cold marble floor outside the blue drawing room with her knees pulled to her chest and her face wet, he stopped. He actually stopped walking. In 14 years, Thomas Hendricks had never stopped walking on duty. It was a Wednesday in late October. The palace had that particular chill it got when the heating hadn't caught up with the season yet, the kind that lived in the walls, in the curtains, in the paintings of long-dead relatives who all seemed to be watching you from slightly the wrong angle. Charlotte was 8.75. She would correct you, with the particular ferocity of a child who understands that 3/4 of a year is not nothing. She was wearing her school uniform still, the navy pinafore, white collar, one sock slightly lower than the other. Her school bag was beside her, tipped on its side, a worksheet about Roman aqueducts halfway falling out of it. She didn't look up when Thomas stopped. She was staring at something in her hand. He lowered himself, slowly, the way you'd approach a bird that hadn't decided yet whether to trust you, and sat on the floor beside her. Not close, just near. He rested his forearms on his knees and looked at the same wall she was looking at. Neither of them said anything for a moment. The Roman aqueducts look complicated, he said finally, nodding at the worksheet. Charlotte looked at the paper like she'd forgotten it existed. Gravity does most of the work, she said. Her voice was very steady for a voice that had recently been crying. They didn't even have pumps. Smart. The Romans. Yeah. Another silence. The kind that wasn't uncomfortable, just waiting. She uncurled her fingers. In her palm was a small brooch. Enamel. A bluebird, wings spread. The pin at the back was bent wrong, like someone had tried to take it and not been careful about it. Thomas looked at it. He didn't ask. That was why she told him. She said it was hers. Charlotte's voice didn't waver, didn't crack, just delivered the information the way you'd read a sentence off a page. She said Granny gave it to her years ago, and it had been misplaced, and she was so glad it had turned up. She closed her fingers around the brooch again. But Mummy gave it to me. Last Christmas. She put it in a little box with tissue paper and everything, and she said bluebirds mean. Charlotte stopped. She pressed her lips together. She said it means someone is watching over you even when you can't see them. Thomas said nothing. The marble floor was very cold. The painting across the hall was of some ancestor on a horse, looking smug about it. She took it right off my bag strap. Charlotte's voice finally did something then. Not break, exactly, more like bend. In front of everyone. Said I'd probably found it somewhere and didn't know what it was. Said children shouldn't wear valuable pieces. She looked at her palm again. She gave it back when I started crying. Like that was why she was giving it back. Like I'd earned it back by crying. She said this like it was the worst part. Thomas thought it probably was. He didn't say I'm sorry. He'd learned a long time ago that I'm sorry was a door that closed things, and this needed to stay open. Did anyone else see? He asked. Charlotte nodded once. Mrs. Alcott. And James. James was one of the younger footmen, barely 20, who turned pink at the ears when anyone spoke to him directly. Okay, Thomas said. He stood up from the floor, held out his hand. Charlotte looked at it for a second, assessing, the way her mother used to do, that same slight tilt of the head, and then she took it, and he pulled her to standing. She straightened her sock, picked up her bag, tucked the Roman aqueducts back inside. Thomas. Yeah. Don't make it into a big thing. He looked at her. 8.75. Uniform slightly rumpled. One hand still curled around a bent bluebird brooch like it was the most important thing in the palace, because it was. I'm just going to have a conversation, he said. Charlotte looked at him for a long moment with eyes that understood considerably more than they should have had to at 8.75. Okay, she said. And she walked off down the corridor toward her rooms with her school bag on her shoulder and her spine very straight. And she didn't look back. Thomas waited until she rounded the corner. Then he reached for his radio. The thing about Mrs. Alcott was that she remembered everything. This was professionally useful and personally exhausting, and she had long ago made peace with both. 41 years in royal household service meant she had absorbed, cataloged, and filed away approximately 10,000 small moments that could never be spoken of at dinner parties. She kept them the way some women kept grudges, not to use, just to know. She was in the linen room when Thomas found her, counting pillowcases with the focused intensity of someone for whom pillowcases had geopolitical significance. She didn't stop counting when he came in. 14, she said. Then, I was going to come find you. Thomas leaned against the door frame. Were you? Don't do that. Don't be dry with me. I haven't got the patience for it today. She set down the pillowcase and looked at him squarely. Margaret Alcott had a face built for squarely. The child was beside herself. That brooch, she stopped, pressed her mouth flat. Her mother's hands put that on her bag. You understand what I'm saying to you. I understand. She didn't find it somewhere. The edge in her voice could have cut the pillowcases. It was pinned right there on the strap where it always is. I've ironed that bag strap 16 times, and the brooch is always there. Always. Thomas nodded slowly. James saw it too. Mrs. Alcott folded her hands in front of her. He won't say so easily. He's young, and he's frightened, and I can't blame him for that. But he saw. I'm not going to put James in the middle of anything. Then, what are you going to do? Thomas looked at the window. The sky outside was doing that thing October skies do, going gray and bruised like it was deciding whether to commit to rain. There are protocols, he said. Mrs. Alcott looked at him for a long moment. Thomas, there are protocols, he said again, quietly, like it was something he was reminding himself of, not her. And some of them exist for reasons people don't talk about out loud. She held his gaze. 41 years had given her an excellent grasp of what was being said inside the things people said out loud. Will it go anywhere? She asked. It'll go where it needs to go. She picked up the next pillowcase. Resumed counting. 15, she said. And then, without looking up, she's been trying to get that brooch for 2 months. Little comments. Is that an original piece? How interesting. I wonder where that came from. I thought she was just being herself. I didn't think she'd actually. A pause. 16. Thomas pushed off the doorframe. Thank you, Margaret. She almost looked up. Not quite. Don't thank me. Just make sure that child doesn't have to cry again to get back what's hers. The report took 40 minutes to write. Thomas was not a man who enjoyed paperwork. He was also not a man who cut corners on it, which was a tension he'd lived with for 14 years. He wrote the incident report in the small duty office off the East Corridor, in the standard format, with the standard language: incident observed, time, location, individuals present, description of events. And then, he printed 2 copies and sat looking at them. The first copy went in the file. The second copy went somewhere else. Not up the normal chain. Not through the usual channels. There were protocols, and then, there were the protocols beneath the protocols, the ones written for the category of events that looked small from the outside, and weren't. He sealed the envelope himself, walked it himself, handed it personally to a man named Colin who had 17 years in a role no one's official title accurately described, and who took the envelope without asking a single question, because in 17 years he had learned that the envelopes that arrived without questions were the ones that mattered. Thomas walked back through the East Corridor. The marble floor was still cold. The painting of the ancestor on the horse was still looking smug about it. He didn't see Charlotte until the following morning. She was at breakfast in the smaller dining room, reading something. A book about deep-sea creatures, pictures of things that lived in the dark and made their own light. She had a piece of toast in one hand, and she was reading with the focused disregard for everything else that was recognizably, specifically hers. The bluebird brooch was back on her bag strap. Thomas clocked it in the first second, didn't say anything, went and stood at his post near the door. Charlotte turned a page, took a bite of toast. After a moment she looked up, not at him exactly, just in his general direction. The way you check that a familiar lamp was still on. He gave her one small nod. She looked back at her book. Anglerfish, read the caption under the picture she was on. Uses bioluminescence to lure prey in total darkness. The light is the trap. Thomas thought about that for a second. Then, he looked at the door, and waited, and did his job. 3 days later, there was a meeting. Not a confrontation. Not a scene. Palace things rarely were. They happened in the language of scheduling adjustments and quietly rerouted invitations, and certain rooms that became, suddenly, unavailable for certain purposes. You had to know how to read it. Mrs. Alcott knew how to read it. She didn't say anything. She just noticed that the Tuesday arrangement, the informal tea that had started appearing on the calendar 2 months ago, the one that required Charlotte to be present in the blue drawing room at a time that interrupted her homework, that arrangement simply wasn't on the calendar anymore. Gone. Quietly. like a stain lifted from linen by someone who knew what they were doing. Charlotte noticed it differently. She was doing her Roman aqueducts homework. Finished now, Gravity explained. The teacher had given her a gold star which she considered underwhelming for a concept that had shaped civilization, when she registered the absence of a thing she'd been dreading. No one knocked on her door at 4 o'clock. She waited for it. The way you wait for a sound you've been hearing every week and have started to build your body around. The flinch before the knock, the careful face you put on, the practiced smile that didn't reach anything above the cheekbones. 4 o'clock came and went. She put the gold star on the corner of her worksheet and stared at it. Then, she opened her sea creatures book to the chapter on the vampire squid, which despite the name ate marine snow and was mostly just dramatic, and she read until dinner. Dinner was fine. Dinner was, by measurable degrees, better than it had been in a while. A thing Charlotte couldn't have explained because she wasn't entirely sure what had shifted, just that the air in the room sat differently, that a particular quality of attention that used to land on her from across the table like a hand on the back of the neck was simply not there tonight. She ate her entire dinner. Even the fennel, which she found philosophically objectionable, but tolerable when not also managing other things. Her father caught her eye at one point. He had bags under his eyes that hadn't been there a year ago, and gray coming in at his temples, and a sadness that lived in his smile the way damp lives in old buildings. Not always visible, but always present, structural. He looked at her. A real look, the kind that parents who are paying attention give. She looked back. He reached over and tucked her collar flat where it had flipped up. That was all. That was enough. Thomas submitted his monthly incident summary on the 1st of November. Standard format. The Charlotte incident was item 7 of 12. Item 7. Minor distress incident, child under protection, October 26th, East Corridor, 1642. Matter assessed, reported per protocol, resolved without escalation. No further action required. For lines. He read it back once. Then he filed it. The brooch stayed on Charlotte's bag strap through November, through December, through the Christmas that was the first one with a different shape to it. A quieter shape. A shape that hurt in the specific way of things that have changed permanently rather than temporarily. She wore it to the school Christmas concert. She wore it to the Boxing Day walk. She wore it to a small, private thing in January that wasn't on any official calendar and wasn't photographed and was attended by exactly the right number of people. She didn't think about the brooch constantly. She thought about it the way you think about something that is simply there, reliably, without fuss, the way a door is there or a lamp is there or a person is there when you come around a corner at the wrong time looking hollowed out, and they sit down on the cold floor next to you, and don't say I'm sorry, and don't make it into a big thing. Just near. Just present. The bluebird's pin had been bent back carefully and refastened. Someone had done it with small, precise tools. She didn't know who. It had just appeared on her bag strap one morning, repaired. The enamel hadn't cracked. The wings were still spread, watching over her even when she couldn't see who was doing the watching. That's what her mother had said bluebirds meant. Charlotte ran her thumb over it every morning before school. Quick, barely a second. Then, she slung her bag on her shoulder and walked out into whatever the day was going to be, spine straight, socks even, Roman aqueducts explained, sea creatures cataloged, gold stars provisionally accepted. 8 3/4. Not crying. End.